Hi, I'm Taylor Yeast, and this is my persuasive speech. So when I was a younger kid, I can definitely remember my very first dog. It was a black lab puppy, and my parents surprised me with him when I was only about 9 or 10 years old, I would say. And I remember rushing into my parents' room with him and thinking that someone had lost their dog. So I was like crying until I realized that it was my puppy. Unfortunately, my parents purchased him from a breeder that didn't really know what they were doing. So he had to be put down when he was only 2 years old because he had a lot of hip problems, joint problems, and his liver was failing. So today I'm here to talk about why you should purchase a dog from the shelter, basically rescuing a dog, instead of buying a dog from a breeder or like the store, something like that. So according to PumaInc.org, after the cost of vetting after you get a dog is about $425 to $480. That's whether you buy or adopt a dog. Now the difference is when you're adopting a dog, that cost might go down because you could have vaccinations already included. The cost of having them microchipped and fixed could also already be included. So that cost could fluctuate a little bit based on that. When you're buying a puppy from a store or from a breeder, you're not getting any of that. All of that will come out of pocket for you. And so then you have to think about the difference is $75 to $100 to adopt a dog versus $400 to sometimes even $3,000 to $4,000 for a designer puppy from a breeder. So the cost could almost be thousands of dollars more to buy a dog versus saving a life from the shelter. One of the myths of the shelters is that the only dogs there are dogs with bad behavior or mutts or older dogs. And I understand you might be looking to adopt a dog or buy a puppy because you want a young dog. You want to start from scratch maybe. And that's just not true. Shelters have every size, shape, breed, and age of dog and cat coming in. I know for a fact here in Okinawa shelters we constantly have puppy and kitten litters coming through. And people who buy these designer dogs often bring them to the shelter once they're no longer puppies, or they just don't have the time or energy to deal with the puppies. So you often see full-bred dogs being brought into the shelters. And we currently have each year, 6.5 million animals enter shelters in the United States. That means 2.7 million dogs and cats are killed each year because no one adopts them. And if we were to implement where people only bought or adopted from the shelter instead of buying from breeders, this number would drastically reduce. So that means every year we're losing almost 3 million animals. Meanwhile, 34% of people who are in the market to look for an animal are purchasing from breeders. Imagine if we used that 34% of people to adopt from the shelters instead. That would reduce the amount of animals entering the shelter as well as the amount of animals being euthanized each year. Lastly, I'd like to talk about the conditions that some of these breeders and puppy mills use for their animals. Oftentimes, the puppy mills have small cages with no shelter, and they're forced to sit in their own pee and poop for days. Oftentimes, they deal with malnutrition, unsanitary food, unsanitary water, little to no vet care. They breed the adult dogs until they can't be bred anymore, and then they either drop them off at a shelter or even euthanize them. And then they take the kittens and the puppies far too young from their parents, which not only is dangerous, but causes behavior problems later in life for these animals. That's for the puppy mills, and the backyard breeders. Generally, they just don't know what all goes into breeding an animal. And so, therefore, we see a lot of genetic problems, which again is exactly what happened to my first dog. They don't understand how much time, energy, money goes into it, and then oftentimes they'll drop entire litters off at the shelter because they just can't take care of them, or they're not going to get as much money as they thought they originally were for the cost of the puppies themselves. So all of this information is to say, um, if you adopt from the shelter, you're basically saving two lives. You're saving the life of the dog that you're adopting, and you're saving a different dog that could have been bred. If everyone adopted from the shelter, we wouldn't have these backyard breeders and people going on Craigslist and selling puppies for hundreds to thousands of dollars, and then maybe later those dogs end up at the shelter as well. And again, we have almost 3 million animals being killed each year, where we have people adopting constantly. If they were to adopt from a shelter, this problem could be solved. So I just implore you, the next time you think about adopting or shopping, maybe consider the facts that I've presented you with today, and that'll help you decide to adopt an animal and save a life instead of shopping. Thank you very much.